The following is a group discussion directed by Mr. Howard, who will now speak.
One of the easiest things to do, to overlook, is the fundamental steps for finding ourselves. This is why we're here. This is why we're studying. This is why we're talking. This is why you're listening to this tape. To find yourself, to find the way out. It's very easy to get involved in complex things, in words, in phrases, in theories, and to forget to return constantly to the basic principles from which we must start. And what we're going to do for a while this morning is to discuss these fundamentals, the basic truths, and remember that we have to come back to them. Now I want those of you listening to this tape to remember something. When we mention some of these elementary virtues, these starting points, say self-honesty, do not assume that you already understand what it means to be self-honest. Don't assume you know what it means to be sincere. The assumptions will destroy any possibility of attaining them much, much more deeply. Make no assumptions at all that you already understand what we're going to talk about. Go right back to the beginning with us, as we're going to do this morning. So what I'd like to do this morning with the two other people present here, I'd like each one of them to discuss in their own way some of these basic, fundamental, starting virtues, if you want to call them that, principles, which we must have. If we don't have these, then everything else we do will be nonsense. We'll be deceiving ourselves. We'll pretend that we understand things that we don't understand at all. So I'd like each of you to, in your own words, bring up, just name them, use a single word, as I have already done, the word self-honesty, the word sincerity, earnestness, and please tell us why these virtues are necessary at the start and indeed throughout all of our studies. Which one of you would like to begin on this? Discuss it in any way that is important to you, something you've discovered, for example. Juan, would you start, please?
Okay. One thing that I thought I already understood was persistence. Persistence in this idea, like self-honesty or sincerity or so forth. Well, persistence has a lot of resistance in there. I have to persist. And I see this resistance in me that I have to go against them. Perhaps there is a subject in a book that I like to study today. But there is this resistance in me that says no. So as much as I have learned about this, that you need persistence, keep after it. So I go against this resistance.
Against your usual habits,
my usual habits
that we all have, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I go ahead and do it. And you will be surprised how much more resistance you find there.
That you didn't know you had before.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I already thought that I already knew this thing. You know, the word persistence, persist. Well, I didn't. There's still more resistance to that persistence.
You're aware, in other words, if I might just restate what you just said, that by trying to be persistent, you become aware of how much resistance there is. How you, when you maybe should be studying or you should be simply observing the position of your physical body, you would much rather daydream or walk down this, take a walk or whatever you usually do for recreation.
Correct.
You find that is very true. We find that our old nature, the old nature doesn't want to change, and this is very valuable to see. Go ahead, unless you are through then.
I'm through,
Sally?
Well, you mentioned self-honesty. During the week, when other people were present, normally in a situation that I was in, people react negatively, and I didn't. And instead of looking back on myself, I looked around to see if the other people had noticed that I wasn't negative. In other words, I wasn't being honest with myself. The work that I had done was destroyed because I had, instead of throwing it back on myself, I had looked out to see what other people had thought of it.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Sure.
So that was being dishonest.
And there's also some anxiety in that,
Uh-huh.
wondering what they thought about it.
Right.
All that.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Either one of you, why on earth are we sitting here talking right now? And let me ask those of you listening to this tape, wherever you might be, why are you studying these things? Why are you listening to this tape? Has that become clear in your mind? Why are you reading books? Why are you practicing these exercises to become more awake? What's it all about? Don't ever go too long without asking yourself why you're doing this. Because you may be unconsciously giving yourself wrong motives, wrong answers. Many people, especially those who come to a group like this for the first time, have wrong ideas as to what it's all about. Many people, very sadly for them, want to use these truths for personal gain. They think it will help make them rich or gain more friends or gain something in this world. And this is not what it's all about at all. Or our motives can be a lot more subtle than that. We might have the motive of wanting to be known as a spiritual person or someone who knows the truth, or we may want to become a teacher or a writer simply because we have a good deal of vanity or because we want to become famous. And if we have all these down deep inside us, we're wasting our time. See, we have no time to waste. Let's look at our motives every day and find out, not in addition as to why we're studying, find out why you said what you said to that other person, or why you thought what you did think. So, I'll ask Warren again this time first. Why are we here? What is our purpose?
Well, the motive that I have right now, what is my purpose, is to change what I am right now. A slave to all these reactions.
Yes.
How I react, how I behave to other things, as people or events.
Could I say then that you're dissatisfied with the way you have been reacting in your earlier life?
Right.
That you want to change your... Then you were not happy with your life in general. And so you're studying these things in order to change yourself.
Right.
That is a good motive.
Right. But also, as you mentioned, Mr. Howard, I have been asking myself, what is my main motive for being in this work, or studying this principle?
Yeah.
And as I go along, let's bring back that self-honesty. Well, my mind was working on something else, which you mentioned a few of them already. Become famous, because in life, that's all we want. to become something, to become famous, one way or the other. And I became aware of a lot of wrong motives I had. I became a famous teacher,
Yes.
like taking all this knowledge from all these books and start teaching somebody, which I know that I don't know.
There's a
I
wrong-
know the
wrong
words.
Yes.
I know the words, but inwardly, I don't know the actual experience of them.
Not living the word. you could
Right.
say.
Mhm.
That's very good.
But my motive is to change myself, the way I react and behave, which I never did like.
Sally, what is your motive?
And my motive is the same as Warren's. It's to change. I get tired of the way I was living, all the confusion, both in myself and in other people. And you see this, and you know that there is another way to live deep down, and to change my reactions, to live from myself instead of being a slave to other people, which I was and am still,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not quite as much as I was before studying this. It's to change into a more decent human being.
One is in command of yourself
Right.
instead of being
so that-
commanded by the outer
Right,
world.
because there's no end if you want to be more famous or if you want to please someone. There's just no end to it.
But does it make you happy now to see that you have overcome a lot of little things that you could not do before?
Yes.
Right,
it
and
does,
this makes
yes.
you have more urge and desire to go after these things,
That's
correct?
right. That's right, Ron.
More and more.
It's encouraging to see how you once were in little things and how you now react entirely different.
Right.
All right. Now, let's discuss practical ways in which we can do more of what we've been discussing. That is, change our reaction to things that happen to us from the exterior world, or change our reaction even to something that we ourselves think. What I'm trying to say is this. An average man gets up in the morning, the minute he gets up, he runs into disappointments, frustrations, unhappiness, blockages of one kind of another in his day, to what he wants, for example. And practically all of them are unseen by the exterior world, because you don't always show disappointment on your face when you have it, but you're feeling it inside, right? What we want to do and discuss, we're going to openly discuss this. What can we do as people who want out, who want to change ourselves, who don't want to live in the old way anymore, and who have ceased, at least to some degree, to deceive ourselves? What can we do when we are disappointed? Let's say I want something. What do I want? Anything at all. I want to win a certain friendship, or I want your approval. I want you to like me. I want to earn more money. I want to feel more secure. Now what? All day long, I am running into a no from life. All day long, I have a desire to get these things, whatever they might be. Security, money, you name it. Those of you listening to this tape, you name the things that you want. And you will see, of course you will see, that you're getting a no, no, no all the time. Sometimes you get yes, and it makes you temporarily happy, temporarily. And so you swing, as we've found out many times before, between elation and depression. Right? Right.
Right.
All right. Now we're getting more intelligent than we used to be. I get disappointed by something. I get shocked by something. Maybe you say something that hurts my feelings. Now I want you to tell me how I can use the very arrows, so to speak, to cure myself of ever getting hit by arrows. Because we don't want to live like other people live, always being hurt and always covering it up and always pretending. How can I use a disappointment, a shock, to remove shocks, not 10% or 50%, but totally, altogether, so I'm not shocked by anything anymore? This is much deeper than you can imagine. Those of you listening to this tape, please don't make assumptions. This is much more complex than we can go into even in 10 tapes. But let's start somewhere. Now, one of you two, please tell me, how can I use a shock to free myself? To not be hurt?
Well, first of all, we have to see that we are getting a shock. This is the first thing. Normally, when we get a shock, they just pass over us because we're not observing them. So the first thing is to see how we normally react and make up our minds that we're going to watch this small feature, whatever it is. Say somebody attacks us.
Right.
Verbally.
Right.
They say something that hurts our feelings. And we always defend or attack them. This is our automatic response. First of all, we have to see that we're doing this. And then continue to be very aware when this incident or when something like this arises and not automatically go into our attack or defense.
Right.
And in that way, if we don't say anything, we feel it. And we become more conscious of it.
Right.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Suppose somebody blames me for something I did or didn't do. My first reaction that I usually do is to, like you say, justify it. Try to get even with that person and, so forth. But you want to know, Mr. Howard, how can you be free from this? Okay. So the first thing I would do is don't let it fall in this false identity that I have, or image. I'll take it with awareness. I will not do nothing. I just stay with it. Whether I'm to blame or not, it makes no difference. The hurt, the pain is here inside of me, not that other person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stay with it and look at it and try to understand it. It's just about the same thing you said, Sally, but in a different way.
Would you explain a little more what you mean? You said a disappointment would fall on your false identity. What does that mean?
Well, in my images I have of myself, don't they know who I am? I'm this very little precious little thing. I'm a nice fellow, kind-hearted, lovable, and all that. Peaceful person, never gets angry. So I must not let it fall in this kind of images. I must take them with understanding that I'm the only one that hurt myself on my own wrong thinking. I've taken things.
Right.
It is interesting how we see ourselves, kind, generous, we have lovely qualities, and how another person sees us. He doesn't see us like this at all.
Not at all.
So how can we agree on anything? We're divided always, because each person has built up this lovely image about himself, and it has to clash in the outer world. It must.
Right.
So therefore we have all this friction, conflict all day.
This is a tremendous thought. Stop and think how tremendous this is, what we've just discussed. And a true thought. Look, if I have no thoughts, no images, no ideas, no opinions about the kind of a person I am, none at all, which does not mean I'm asleep or empty. It means the opposite. It means I'm tremendously awake, but we'll go into that in a minute. But I have no images about myself. How can anything whatsoever hurt me or disturb me. Nothing you say can ever disturb me. Nothing that happens to me in the outer world, if I don't get what I want professionally, if my career doesn't advance as I think it should. Suppose I have no ideas at all about myself. It can't hurt me. Now, this is very advanced, and a lot of people are not at all going to understand what this means. You know why? Because they cannot possibly conceive a state wherein you have no images of yourself. Because, you see why they can't see it? When you are living from an image, you are that image. Therefore, you can't see it. You see why standing outside and looking back is so important? Mm-hmm. So you tell this, what we're talking about, to the average person, first place, he has no interest in it at all. He already has his whole life is filled with false values of what is going to make him happy. And it never occurs to him, never, that none of them ever make him happy. It gets him thrilled, which is another thing. You can get thrilled by getting a raise in pay, or by getting that new man or new woman in your life. And then about 2 weeks later, the thrill is gone. Now you have to have another one. This is the path of neurosis. It always has to get new thrills by giving it other names, like calling it happiness or a beautiful marriage or something like that, a beautiful relationship. When I begin to see the need for dropping all ideas about myself and experience the fact that I can be free of feeling bad when I get a no from life, this is indeed, as was said a minute ago, a very encouraging thing. Because I begin to see the way out of all pain, of all shock, of all disappointment. And as Sally said, the first step. If you don't take the first step, you can't go to the second. Mm-hmm. I have to see it. And you know what this really amounts to? Let me speak very frankly about this. Let me speak frankly to you listening to this tape. I have to see what a mess my life really is. I have to see what terrible shape I really am in. I have to see how much I lie, how much I pretend. And then having seen it, I have to not be afraid of it. You will be afraid at first, because a mechanical reaction will always be there. But I have to begin to examine it scientifically in order to understand the whole thing. Then I'll begin to be free of it. But it's long, hard work. Now we're going to connect another word. We're going to take a single word, and I'd like each of you to discuss this, again, in connection with our group work and with your own personal work. The word is security. First of all, each of you discuss false security. I won't say any more than that. I don't want to give you any leads. You just jump off wherever you wish into discussing the false security in which most men live. Sally, you go first this time.
All right. I could have false security in my family, people. I depend on them to be there. If I lose them, my security has gone. I can have false security in possessions. I have a lovely car, say. I have a beautiful house. And the test is, when this goes, how will I feel? When this is taken away from me, my house is me. If I depend on it for security, my world will crumble when it is taken away.
If you lose whatever.
If I lose whatever I feel secure with, my world, as I see it, will crumble, and I will crumble.
Right.
As a result.
Right.
I can feel secure also with my position at work. This gives me a feeling of security. If I'm fired, how will I react?
Right. Right. Do you know what it means? May I interrupt?
Yes.
Please. Then you continue. Let me ask you, do you know what it means do you understand what it really means to be secure? It means, of course, to have no security at all.
Yes.
Right. To not depend on anything.
Right.
And you don't have to. Mm-hmm. As long as you see all these other things we're talking, if you're putting all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together. Mm-hmm. Look, if I don't exist as a labeled self, a man who needs to be successful, How on earth can I be insecure if I'm not given success by the outer world? Or even if I do become successful, I can still be a free human being, obviously, as long as I don't identify with the success and think that I did it. I didn't do a thing, because there's no I, no separate ego who operates on that exterior world at all. This is very important to work with. And those of you listening to this, please go over this, and I'll repeat the thought. There is no separate self, no separate ego, which can operate on the exterior world at all. I know how strange this sounds to you. Don't reject it because it's new to you. You do not exist as a separate self which does anything in the exterior world, because you are not separate from it. You are part of it, and you are one with it. This is why, you know, there's an old, you've heard the old saying about a man who, when he succeeds at something, he brags about it and credits everything to himself, but when he fails, it's someone else's fault. See, he doesn't see the contradiction. He still wants to be proud of himself, but he couldn't have any part of failure because he has images of being successful. So security means to be without any need for psychological security. Of course we need homes, we know that. We need to have bread on the table. We're not talking about that. I think Sally has a thought.
Yes, well, that's what I was talking about, Mr. Howard, with psychological security.
Right.
For instance, say a dear friend of mine gave me an ornament which I display in my home. Each time I look at this ornament, if I am identified with it, all the nice things about this friend go through my mind. And this is a sign of identification, obviously, because I'm being taken away. This ornament is giving me a nice feeling,
Right.
in other words.
Right.
And this is what our possessions do to us if we identify with them.
Right.
And I think really the key word is identification.
Discuss that, please.
Well, identification means when we are very attached to something, we lose ourselves in it. For instance, this ornament I got, each time I look at it, I think of my friend and the good times we had together, and I'm living in the past and being taken away from myself at present, and at the same time, I'm getting this nice false feeling. What, if I'm identified, I think is nice.
Right.
And this is what we have to see.
It's also a form of idol worship, isn't it? Among other things.
It's idol worship.
You're worshiping this object that you're given, or a human being.
That's, of course, it's either with things or human beings. We can get this false sense from both. Go ahead, Vernon.
Okay, false security. As we are conditioned that security is to have many friends, not to be lonely. If you're lonely, go out and get as many friends as you can possibly gather around. This is what society tells us all the time. This is what we hear over and over again.
Right.
And I was hooked by it. Okay? So when I was by myself, I felt miserable. So I have to have this friends around. If I didn't have nobody around, I was lost.
Right.
So this is one type of false security. And there's many, as you have mentioned them, Sally. We identify with all these things. Money is one thing, as Mr. Vernon Howard said, that we have to work. We have to earn our bread and so forth. Pay rent, But to be without the images, self-worth, that I must prove to my family or to my wife that I'm a very successful man. All this is false security that I accepted as security. And when I didn't have it, I was lost. I was in pain. So you're right, Mr. Howard, when you say to be secure is to have no security whatsoever. I understand this to a certain level.
to not be clinging to anything,
Right, not to
attached
cling.
to anything.
Let him go.
But you know, now, a person hearing this, you know exactly how they're going to react to it. They may not say it out loud. They will, you think of all the things they could say, they'll say, what do you mean not be attached to anything? Well, it's a sign of love to be attached to your wife or your husband. Do you know why they're saying this? Because they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
That is fear talking when they say, and they also don't understand, we didn't say you couldn't have a wife or a husband. We didn't say you couldn't have a nice home or have an ornament in your room for that matter.
That's right.
We're talking about something which most people never ever think about. So it isn't easy to explain with words. You have to experience it. You have to see it. And you see it mostly by getting knocked down by life and understanding that you were knocked down because you were attached to something psychologically, mentally, which was a wrong move on the part of your mind. So if we are not attached to anything, we can't get knocked down. If we don't have images of being a great man, we're not insulted when reality shows us that we're very foolish and not great at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then the absence of all these phony ideas, then we were great in a new sense. But there's no vanity involved. Great simply because we're a free human being. Things like that. Go ahead, Warren.
One thing that interests me of what you said a little while ago, both of you, Sally, about idol worship, taking a person and put him in a frame, as we use the word. Well, I noticed that with me, referring to you, Mr. Howard. Here I have met great author, writer, so many books. So I here was connected with him. Yeah? That gave me a false sense of feeling, that I belong to something.
Right.
Hmm?
We understand, yeah.
Right.
That's a stage.
Right, it's a state. But as I continue working, I saw it. It was painful. I saw it. But this is part of that idol worship we talk about.
Yes.
Yes. We talked a lot about self-images, and I want to straighten something out on this, because there are many philosophies, teachings, that stress the building of self-images, like saying, have an image of yourself of being strong, of being confident. And let me tell you that it is completely false. It will do nothing but get you deeper into the trap. The true way out, and it's not my way, it doesn't belong to me or anyone else, it belongs to the whole truth itself. It belongs to anyone who wants it. The way out is to destroy all self-images, to end them, because images are the things that make you miserable, because they're false. They have no reality at all. They only divide you from other people and from exterior events. We've already covered that, so I won't go into it more about the idea that if you're free from images, you're free from all disappointments. But let me summarize this idea of what they sometimes call the self-image psychology. Simply remember that your aim is to end images, not to build them. And when you begin to end them, you will have a feeling that you've never ever had before in your life. And this will be the feeling that this is the right thing to do. You know, when any of us are on the wrong track, following a false philosophy, religions or anything that flatters you, that appeals to the ego, we know they're wrong, don't we? Mm-hmm. Because we know that we are wrong. Right. You can go to church for 40 years and still be a very bitter, hateful person. We have seen through this. We're trying to see through it. So as to not say one thing and feel another. People say they feel good because they go to church or they worship God or whatever. You know that it's not the truth, don't you? You know that they're deceiving themselves. We want to really feel good, because we're not divided inwardly. Not divided by saying one thing and thinking another, for example. So just in summary of this one point, we are here, right in this room right now, and I hope those of you listening to this tape are listening to it with a purpose, with the right aim of destroying images. And this is why we've discussed them so much this morning, so you begin to understand what they're all about. You know what an image is? An image is nothing more than a thought. And to classify it a little bit more, it is an imaginative thought. It belongs in imagination. It is both thought and imagination. They're the same thing. Thought is imagination and vice versa pretty much. Thoughts can be other than imagination, however. So I have an imaginary idea about who I am, but that all in the world it is a thought, an imagination. And as Sally said, you might have an opposite thought about who I am, and so we clash with each other and we fight. If I didn't have the thought and the imagination, we wouldn't fight. You understand? So there can be no conflict if I have no image at all. Now, it is very frightening at the start to give up images. Now you tell me why it's frightening. Those of you listening to this tape should listen very carefully to this. Why is it frightening to give up images? Do you see why? Should I go first? Let me go first.
Go ahead.
Because my images are my identity of who I am. And I'm afraid that I will destroy myself, come to the end of myself, if I end the ideas I have about me. You see? Yeah. I'm afraid, in other words, I'm afraid of death. That's what it amounts to. I'm afraid of dying. But the reason I'm afraid is because I don't understand the whole falsity of it. That I am not really this image of being what? The successful person, the pleasant person, the dynamic person that I have about myself. I don't see the falsity of it. And I take myself being this imaginary person, therefore it becomes very frightening for me to give it up. Which means I have to go through, pass through this fear of giving up my images, of dying to them, of letting go of them. So this is what, this is what our work consists of. Every day, finding something that frightens us, and it's, again, what Sally said, we have to see it first or we'll never believe anything we're talking about. Don't miss what we're talking about. This is the way out. Having seen that I'm afraid because something has attacked my precious self-image, I can now begin to simply give it up, die to it. Now I'll be a little bit freer than I was before. So all day long, this is what we're working at, to give up an image. Then we find out that we were afraid of our own deliverance. That's what it really amounted to. And you see that what you called a friend, this image, was actually your enemy. This is what was keeping you miserable all the time. I'll give you a method for ending self-images. And Juan brought it up briefly. We'll go into it a little bit more. Whenever you get your feelings hurt, whenever you get shocked, whenever you get disappointed, when you receive a negative impression, and you know what we mean by a negative impression, you know what it is. When you get a negative impression of any kind, and let's say you get it from a person, that will make it easier to understand. The person hurts your feelings. Never resist the feeling. Do not fight it. You understand why? Anything you fight, there's many reasons. Anything you fight, you will never understand. As long as you prefer fighting, which you do, if you fight, you prefer it, period. Don't alibi, don't excuse. If you fight, you love the fight. And don't you say you don't. You do what you really want to do, or what you feel compelled to do, which is the same thing. When you don't resist a hurt feeling, you see what you're able to do now? You're able to look at it and understand why you had it. You will connect it with an image, for example. You have an image of being efficient, and your boss says you're inefficient, and you get your feelings hurt. All right, maybe you were inefficient at that particular time, or maybe you weren't. That's beside the point. The idea is to watch your reaction to it. But don't protect yourself. Don't argue, don't fight, don't get angry. Instead, look at your hurt feelings. That will begin to destroy an image. And you know what it else will do, too. It'll begin to destroy your pain, your suffering. No, go ahead.
Make you more efficient.
Well, of course it will.
At work.
Yeah.
Look, when you're in a negative state, you're not one with yourself. You're wandering all over the jungle, the mental jungle, being angry. How can you be efficient when you're doing that? A person who has cleared his mind of negative thoughts and negative feelings. This man is terribly efficient on the everyday level. He can do things that in half the time and do twice as much. This is one of the practical values of getting ourselves out of this mess that we're all in. All right, that'll be enough. Yes.
Oh,
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, Mr. Howard, in connection with practical matters and being more efficient, when I first started on this work, I didn't connect this with the work.
Yes.
I thought working was reading and looking at myself as far as negative emotions are concerned and various things, but I didn't realize that to get things done in the shortest possible time was also part of work.
Certainly.
Not to daydream. This takes in a lot. Daydreaming, imagination. You go to it and get it done without any thought. This is also part of it.
Right.
This images we're talking about, and also you just mentioned daydreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Those daydreams, if we pay attention to them, tell us about this imaginary picture, don't they?
Yes, they do. Watch either a negative one or a positive one.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever run, those of you who listen to this tape, have you ever run thoughts through your mind of how badly someone treated you? And you saw yourself as being persecuted, maybe? Mm-hmm. Or take the contrary. Have you ever run through in your mind a situation where for a moment you were the center of attention when you were with other people? Maybe you said something clever and you got a laugh from it, or everyone was looking at you. Maybe you even gave a talk and you ran it through your mind and you loved to see yourself the center of attention. All this is wasteful. You're ruining your life when you do this. You know what people are going to say when you tell them this? They can say, well, what's the matter with having a pleasant image, running a pleasant image back in my mind over something nice that happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
What happens is that you're now living in time. You're not living in the present moment. This is just as much an escape as drinking or whatever you do for your escapes, so that you won't face things as they are. It can be just as much an escape. Do not live in daydreams, in pleasant ones or unpleasant ones, because they both make you the center of your own attention, which is, again, an image. It connects with an image which we have to destroy. You're going to have to go against your habits. Go ahead.
Are we apt to cling to what we call pleasant and discard what is unpleasant, and what's pleasant about ourselves we think is us?
Right. So, to summarize the last of this side of the tape, we are here not to build images, but to end them, so that we can be free of the tyranny of images. Remember that much for now. We're going to discuss a subject that is important, and important to keep in mind all the time as you're working on yourself. And that word is counterfeit. Now, if you like, we'll supply some synonyms for that word. Counterfeit is something that is false. It is something that is artificial. It is something that masquerades as having value, but it has no value at all. So we're going to discuss counterfeit independence. You ask the average man you meet on the street whether he's a free and independent human being, and he will tell you yes, that he is. And he will not be at all. He will be a slave to himself. He will be living in a counterfeit freedom, counterfeit happiness, an artificial life in ways which he hasn't even thought about, because he's never examined himself. He's never seen his actual state. So I'd like each of you here to discuss, in your own words, the subject of artificial independence and true independence. We know very well that the masses of human beings, the mass of human beings, live in false freedom. Look, it's not difficult at all. Let me ask you, those of you listening to this tape, when you are angry, are you free or are you a slave? What is your state when you are resentful, when you're upset, when you're irritated, when you feel that other people mistreat you or they owe you more than they give you? What is your state? Is that a state of freedom? If this is the way you live, then do not say that you know what it means to be free, because you don't. This is slavery. This is imprisonment. So, we're going to examine artificial freedom and then go on from there and see what true freedom is, which we've already gone into and which we've discussed opening ways to achieve it. Who'd like to discuss artificial independence? Let's use the word independence this time. For example, shall I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
A man thinks that he thinks of himself, of his own. This is difficult to follow, but you have to do this. You have to see it. The average man thinks that he has a separate ego. Do you remember we went into this? He has a separate self, that is free and independent. Having this idea that he has a separate individuality, he will also think that he is the author of his own thoughts, that this individual self thinks these thoughts, and therefore he is the actor of his actions that come out of these thoughts. The whole thing is an illusion from beginning to end. It's like the man throws a rock through the air, and if that rock was able to think, the rock would say, I am moving of my own power. It's not moving of its own power at all. It is moved by, if you want to use the phrase, a higher power, a greater power. So every human being does think, certainly, but he does not think of himself, because, listen, there is no self there. There's a physical body there, but that physical body isn't you. That's an identification. That's a label. You have a name. And you take the name and the body and your particular collection of thoughts as you, which is not you at all. Therefore, you do not think independently. I'll explain briefly, and then you can comment. I'll tell you what it really means to think independently, to really be a free thinker, really be, and not counterfeit, not false. It means simply to be completely free of illusions, of false thoughts, of other things we talked about on the other side of the tape, of daydreams, of imaginations, of about who we are. When you have got rid of everything that is false, then you are thinking independently. Now listen, not in the sense that you are the origin, the originator of your own thoughts, but that you are flowing with the whole cosmic thought. Do you see this? Look, you are not separate from me, and neither are you. And none of us are separate. Mm-hmm. There's just one thing. Now, I will deliberately use the term. There's just one thing, and that is God. That is truth with a capital T. That's reality with a capital R. There's only wholeness. WHOLENESS. We are not separate. Therefore, if you and you have freed your mind of illusions, and I have freed my mind through hard self-work, we all think the same thoughts. Not necessarily an everyday task, because you may have to think, I have to replace the light bulb, while at the same second in my own home I'm thinking, well, I have to change the tire on my car. But these thoughts are not forming identities, images. They're simply practical, which we think in order to get things done on the everyday level. But there's no division between us at all, is there? So to be truly independent means that you and I are one in our thinking. You see, You understand this? You understand that there's only one mind, really? Put it that way. There's only one mind. It is only as I live in illusion that I have a mind separate from yours that I get into trouble. And you get into trouble if you're thinking the same thing. So, to be independent means to be one with this all, capital A-L-L, with this wholeness, with the one thing that exists, and not be divided. But do you see what you have to do in order to understand this? You have to die to egotism. You know what egotism is, do you not?
Right.
Egotism means that I think that I am separate from you. And also it means that I think I'm either worse than you or better than you. Those terms do not exist to the free man. He uses them as words, but they don't apply to them. Because he knows that he's neither better nor worse because he doesn't exist as a person who is divided in any way at all. We're seeking to end mental division, which will also end emotional division, by the way. I'll summarize and repeat, and then you can comment as you wish. The truly free and independent mind is one that has cleared itself of all false thoughts, especially false thoughts about its origin, that is, that you are an originally separate human being. This is simply an acquired sense of self that we have, and a false sense of self at that, see? So, to be one with God, with truth, with reality, is to be independent, but not your independence and my independence, but the independence. And when you have done all this work necessary of dying to the false sense of self, you will not only see it, but you will live it. You will actually live what we're talking about, which means that you will also feel it. This is what we're heading for, this true liberty, which has no egotism, has no vanity in it, which is not divided. Then you are above words about freedom. Have you ever noticed how much on television news, for example, you read about freedom, political freedom, social freedom, financial freedom? They don't exist at all. You know, you can have a lot of money and still be slave, right? You know that. You can have 1,000 friends who phone you all day long and still be in your own psychological prison. We are going above words, for heaven's sake, to the actual state. Juan said earlier, in his own words, that we want to experience what we have known first as knowledge. We get it as knowledge first. It is knowledge to most people that the truth shall make you free. Now, we want to experience that as a fact. Please comment on anything we've said, especially about this important idea of being a truly independent person, because you're one with the whole and therefore not opposed by anything. Any thoughts on that?
Well, first I would like to comment on artificial independence. I always thought that I was in control of my own thoughts, my own thinking. And as I got more knowledge, studied these ideas, principles, I became aware that it wasn't so. I was just repeating what everybody else told me. You are Democrat, and so forth. So I thought I was in charge of my own thinking, that I could think for myself. And it was all acquired. Everybody told me, do this, do that. That's what I was doing. I didn't have nothing that belonged to me.
Right.
It was all artificial. You must do this, you must attend this church or this other church and so forth. And this to me is artificial. This is not true independence.
It's a pretense.
It's pretense.
A painful pretense.
But of course, nobody could tell me different though.
Right, of course.
Okay?
Of course.
If somebody told me that, well, I think for myself. Nobody tells me how to think. But as I went more into this, I found that it was false. That I didn't do no thinking for myself. But you have to see it, you have to work with it. or else it won't make no sense. Don't believe it or disbelieve it. Just experiment with it and find out for yourself whether it is true or not. And this is the only way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Well, before entering the work, I thought of myself as an independent person. And already by labeling it, independent to me meant having a fixed position, not leaving my position for anyone else's. It was fixed, and already in that fixed position, I'm resisting. I've divided you and me with having this fixed position, and this is mainly what people call independence.
Right.
It's a fixation, fixed, rigid. They can't give. I have my opinion, and I'm going to stick with it, no matter what anyone else thinks. All right, that's how I used to think. During the week, a lady asked me to join a club, and it's very easy to go over and join clubs and all this, but I really don't want to join a club. And the person who wanted me to join it, I could see, was merely wanting me to affirm her own identity, her own picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I said no. And now, if you're going to work, you have to stand alone and be able to refuse people, because you are all alone, no matter what. And you have to see what you value more. Do you value these little pleasantries, or are you going to work for your own liberty?
Yes. Yes.
But it's hard to do, right? It's hard to do.
Yes, it's
right?
very difficult, but you have to see the value of it.
Right. Uh-huh.
And stand alone and say no. See
Right.
what you really want to do with your own life.
Sally, when you say no to someone, let's set the stage a little better for that. Suppose you had a girlfriend in your life that used to, get together and go out with her shopping or having dinner together, whatever you do, and it finally dawned on you that a lot of this, and perhaps all of it, was a sheer waste of your time. You understand?
Yes.
And so you start to study these things, and you begin to feel, I really don't want to waste my time just sitting around and blabbing all night and shopping for things which I really don't need anyway. You see, you're in a crisis period now, aren't you?
Right.
Because you don't want to waste your time going out with this girl all the time, and yet you know that if you start falling away from her, she's going to have a reaction toward you and maybe even dislike you.
Right.
Now, you discuss that situation, because I know you understand what I'm talking about.
Well, this actually did happen. You go along with your friends or people who want you to do things, you just go along with them. But then, when you start working, you begin to see how useless it is. You're just really keeping each other comfortable.
Asleep.
Asleep, right. You're encouraging your own sleep and another person's.
True.
So I saw the folly of it, and your friends, so-called friends, fall away. And now your friends are the ones who are working along with you, trying to become more conscious.
Very good, yeah. See how this is at least one small step toward independence?
Mm-hmm.
See, two people who are engaged in things like this, and it could be two men, to anybody, husband and wife, how you are each other's slave, because as you said, you're keeping each other comfortable. What each person is saying, you keep me from being lonely, and I'll keep you from being lonely. And so you live lonely. How are you going to get over being lonely unless you face the fact and quit trying to run away from it and look at it? Then, as we've said many times, then if you want to have friends in your life, that's up to you. But it's not on the terms of trading anymore, of bargaining. You're a free human being, and you can walk into their life or walk out of it. You're totally free. You don't sit around waiting for your telephone to ring. That is slavery. It also means, Sally, in a case like this, you see where the term courage enters into it? You're going to have to bear the negative reaction this girlfriend has when you start to suggests that you don't want to waste your time doing this anymore, because you know very well she's leaning on you, and she may actually become hostile toward you for letting her go. Why? Because you've thrown her back on her loneliness. But you have reached the point where you said, I'm sorry, I have to go ahead. I'm not going to let you hold me back. I can't hold myself back anymore. So whatever your reaction, I'm sorry. If you want to get angry, that's up to you. That's your problem, by the way. But I have to go on and find myself.
Yeah, that's a very good subject to go in. One thing that really shocked me on that was that I was doing all these things not because I liked the person. I thought I did.
Yeah.
Pretended I did.
Right.
But the main thing behind it was I was afraid not to do it. Okay? When I start going away from it, refusing them, I found out that I was very afraid, because now this person were getting hostile, like you say. They were getting angry at me.
Yes.
And all I was doing, like Sally said, was I wanted company to stay with them. And they wanted the same thing in return. So we used to sit there and blab and
Waste your time and waste your energy. Yeah.
But at the same time, there was something in me that disliked it. You know, that it wasn't right what I was doing. That we were just wasting time, and that I was just doing it to pass time. In other words, I didn't want to be with myself.
Right.
I didn't enjoy myself. I was letting other people tell me how to feel. Depend on others.
That's right. And we were actually sacrificing ourselves to that person.
Yes. And you know they sensed it. You know they know it.
And living our lives how they wanted us to live,
That's right.
not how we.
You know, this brings up another little thought. I'll just go into it briefly. You know, when a person detects weakness in you, they tend to want to take advantage of it.
Right.
Because they dislike weakness, because they dislike the weakness they see in themselves. And so they'll attack weakness wherever they can. This is why when you really get strong, through right strength, inner strength, through understanding, you're free of all that. People may attack you, verbally and things like that, but they're not attacking you. They're attacking the truth itself, and they're attacking themselves. So natural strength is effortless. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to plan on it. When you're living from yourself, what is there to think about except for practical things? You do have to think about what time to get up, maybe. But you don't have to think about how to be strong, because you've recovered all this original strength that was ours all along, but we didn't know it because we had the artificial strength in the way. And doesn't it make us tired to live in this artificiality all the time? Please?
That's right. Sleep at night, worry, and all that.
Another point. Great energy is needed to do all these things we're trying to do. And we have this, and again, just as this strength, we have this energy. And part of our work is beginning to recover it through not wasting our time, as Sally brought out, with running around doing foolish and unnecessary things. But bring it even closer to home than that. When I'm daydreaming, or when I'm in an angry state, or I'm depressed, or I'm dejected, look at all the energy I'm wasting. That I could be pouring that energy into some kind of a truly creative work project, like simply being conscious of myself right here and now as I'm sitting here. And I'd like all of you listening to this tape right now to simply be aware of yourself. First of all, be aware of your physical body. Be aware of whether your hands are crossed or not. Drop your jaw if it's tense. Simply be conscious of everything about your physical body. Be conscious of the expression on your face. Now, do you see the sudden change in you? Your attention was on something out there, perhaps listening to the tape, and all of a sudden you were thrown back on yourself. You became conscious of yourself for just a few seconds, maybe. Now, this is what you have to do all day long, and there's many variations, which we won't go into now. Bring your mind back to yourself all the time. Now, connecting with all this, I'd like each of you, after I make an introductory remark, to go on with it a little bit. In authentic self-work, which leads to authentic self-transformation, there is no such thing as the need to believe anything. Belief is out. We don't want to believe anything. Why should you believe anything? Have you ever asked yourself why you should believe anything? There's no reason at all. So what do? We get the facts, don't we?
Right.
We want to know what is true. As long as you're believing something, you can't get the facts about yourself or about the universe. Because belief is on the level of thought, and thought is merely one small part of your total psychological system. Also, and people who don't want to understand these things, you know what they're going to say, but belief is laziness. It's so easy to say, I believe in God, or I believe in the stars, if that's your form of false religion, or I believe in this particular teacher, this famous man who's on television, or wherever he is. I believe. The minute you say I believe, you're not working. You're through. So we have to, among other things, stop being so gullible and start finding true independence by finding out what the facts are. And remember, once again, when the facts are first seen, they become frightening and we tend to resist them because we fear they're taking away something that we have valued, but it's a false value. Because our life is not at all what we thought it was. So when you find the belief, and you should be searching yourself every day for simply believing something, and it's really a meaningless thing. Do you ever ask yourself what you're talking about when you say I believe? You're just using words that you've heard somewhere. And it sounds so wonderful to say I believe. Don't believe anything. Stand on your own and get the facts. Believers can never stand alone. They must always organize. They must always get together, and the more, the merrier. Because if you have 1,000 people in an auditorium, one man identifies with the other 999, and he says something like this, all unconscious. He never sees his thoughts at all. But he says, how nice. Here I am a right person, surrounded by 999 other right people. Besides, here's 1,000 people. How could we all be wrong? Everyone here agrees. We agrees to worship this human being or whatever false doctrine we're following. And so they take false courage and comfort and strength from each other. And when every one of those 1,000 people go home at night, they go right back to their loneliness and to their fear. This is why it's so tiring to believe. You have to keep propping it up. Every minute you have to be on the telephone blabbing about your church doctrine, or talking about this wonderful preacher you heard, or whatever you're worshiping. It can even be, people can worship business just as much as God. They can worship another human being, worship a girl, worship a man, worship a movie star. Who would like to come in?
Yes, you have to say those things for yourself. You have to go beyond the words, as Mr. Howard mentions it. I had a very strong belief, which was false, but I didn't see it, that I believe in the Catholic religion. And I would argue with anybody.
Yes.
I would put a big fight. I believe in God and all that. And as I started working, as Mr. Howard mentioned it here, I became aware that it was false. I didn't believe in God, and I didn't believe in the church. So I became very terrified.
Yes.
Okay? But it was actual truth. I mean, I didn't.
Right.
The only reason I believed in all that because there was a big group, More people belonged to it than any other religion. So I wanted to be secure. All these people must be right. There's hundreds and thousands of them, But as I started working, how could I believe when I was still afraid, very afraid?
What good was your belief, if I may throw that in?
Right.
What good was doing it?
It was just a word.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And I even tried to change people to the very thing that made me very afraid.
You mean convert people.
Right, convert.
Yeah.
Right. Convert people. And I know that you have to see these things. If you don't see them, I mean...
You never believe it.
You never believe it.
You lose the word belief in the common language.
Yes, as one says, when I belonged to a certain denomination, it was the same thing. If anyone went against what I was supposed to believe, or what I did believe, there was argument. Even if it was not spoken, it wasn't spoken because this would have destroyed my image of being a nice Christian. But there was hostility there within me for this person for going against what I believe.
Attacking your religion
Right,
or whatever.
attacking
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Even although it wasn't outward. And really, when you do believe, who are you going to believe? It's just a vicious circle. You believe this person, and then that falls out, then it's another, that. All beliefs have, there's only one basis, and that's destruction, really, isn't it? You can't believe and have it be true. And like one said, everything with the work that we're doing, there's no belief. You have to verify it for yourself. And this, when you experience it, then you know that this is right. And this is the only thing.
Yeah.
It's only self-change that proves to you that this is right.
That's very good.
And also, you don't have to argue. You don't want to convert people. Because you know that unless there's something in an individual that is right, they will themselves come to it. If you try to force it on people, they may do it to please you, but there's nothing there. There's not anything true. They're just doing it from a false standpoint. So you see that there's no point in trying to convert people. If someone shows an interest, then you can give them some truth, but you don't go out and try and convert. That's a relief in itself.
Oh, yeah.
Not to try and convert.
Look at the energy recovered right there. All right. Now, carry this a little more, either one of you. Suppose I'm involved in a false belief, some kind, false religion, false philosophy, a false movement of some kind. All right. And I want to go out and convert other people. I go around talking to everybody. I give them pieces of paper and all that. Why do I do this? What compels me to go around trying to convert everyone? You tell me.
This picture you have of yourself.
Partly that. I'm a sort of a minor savior.
Right.
Who God is appointing to save the rest of the world. Not only that, but every time I convert someone, boy, I take a deep sigh and say, thank heaven, I guess this must be true after all, because he believes in it.
Yes,
see what a trick it is?
He's affirming, if you don't get followers and it's a false movement, then you aren't affirmed. You must have followers. Otherwise, you lose yourself.
Right.
And you must have this identity, this building up.
Yeah.
So the more followers, the more you can say I'm right.
Yeah, but at the same time you're shaking.
And at the same time you think, what if I don't get followers?
Yeah.
Right. Only amounts to that I'm in doubt myself.
That's right.
That's all it amounts to. I'm in doubt, and the more people I get in,
I'm trying to convince myself that a lie is the truth, which you can never do. Right?
See how independence comes into this?
It connects.
In all false beliefs you're dependent. All beliefs are false.
Yeah.
So in all beliefs you're dependent on others.
Bring the word guilt into this now. And let's see how guilt connects with this. Suppose, there's many ways we could do it, but suppose I am involved in a false religion of some kind. And is that all right for now on? Suppose I'm very deeply involved in it, and I'm getting all this false ego gratification. I'm getting all this excitement, and I've met all these new friends. Men and women come over to my house, or I go to the lecture hall, and I'm all caught up. I'm really excited about it. I'm identified with it, in other words. And I think that I've really found the truth at all, after all. Then suppose, after being in this for a long time, and by the way, I've become very hardened, haven't I?
Mm-hmm.
I've built up all these identities of having the truth and all that. Suppose a great crisis comes into my life, something very shocking. You name it. Those of you listening to this tape, you think of something that would shock you, that would cause a crisis in your life if it happened to you, and you fill in the blanks. Could be anything. Could be a loss of your money, the loss of your health, the loss of someone that you were depending upon for company, for consolation. You might get disgraced or shamed. Anything could happen that was a great shock. And yet you're still in this religion, if we can call it that. And so for 1 second, you begin to doubt this religion. And this doesn't happen to very many people, but I'm setting this up so that any of you listening to this who really want out can use this to understand. You're in this false religion and you have a crisis, something that's really shocking. It tears you apart. You are going to doubt, if you're real honest, or let me change that, if you're even just a little bit honest, you're going to doubt all this philosophy and religion that you have followed, because you begin to see that there's now a contradiction. Here you've been talking about being a very peaceful and successful and dynamic person who knows all the answers, and all of a sudden this crisis comes up and you don't know the answers at all. You know, you have a tremendous opportunity here, but the devil, if I can use that term, the devil being mechanicalness and unconsciousness, will attack you at this point and make you, now listen, will make you feel guilty. Right?
Right.
One is nodding. Make you feel guilty, but you know what you're doing? You think that you have to be true, loyal to a false God, because you don't as yet see this as a false God. All these ideas that you have been living by. In the first place, they didn't care one bit for you. They let you down, if I can use that common term. When this crisis came, what happened to you? Did all these beliefs that you have, did they help you? Did they save you? You were empty. You're thrown back on yourself. It was just as if they didn't exist. Right so far?
Right.
So if you were to say to yourself, maybe for the first time in my life, I have to get very self-honest with myself and see that I have been deceiving myself about the condition I'm actually in.
Mm-hmm.
You will feel guilt about abandoning these false ideas, whatever they may be, and it could be one of 10,000 different false systems, false organizations. You will feel guilty. But now, and this is very important to understand, this guilt itself is false. It really has no foundation at all. What on earth do you owe to something which has been destroying you? You ever think of that? Stop and think for a minute. What do you owe to all these people, and I'll make this very frank, and you had better listen to this. All these people you thought were your friends, don't you know they were destroying you? You don't know it. You don't understand what I'm saying, but you can begin to understand it. Don't you know that they are just as lost as you were, and perhaps as you are? Here's where independence comes in. You're going to have to say, I am not going to be your victim anymore. And we had better get right back to fundamentals as we started this talk with. You were never the victim of anyone or anything except your own false thinking, because it was your own wrongly operating mind that brought you into contact with these false doctrines and therefore false people in the first place. You were lonely, weren't you? Those of you listening to the tape, please think with me on this. You were lonely, weren't you?
Right.
You were scared, you were confused, and you cried a whole lot more than you ever let other people know, didn't you? Oh, you were scared. You did. Look, we know this. We understand that at the beginning a person doesn't know which way to turn. We know this. And so you'll go to the first false prophet that comes along who offers to save you. You're so desperate. And because you're so gullible, you'll follow him. Then maybe you'll give him up and you'll go right to another one. And it goes on and on and on. And be very grateful for the day when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Then when this, back to the original point of guilt, then if you've gone this far, if you've actually covered this ground, Then when you get this feeling of guilt over leaving this organization, and not to join another organization for heaven's sake, but to stand on your own, to have the courage to stand alone and say, I am not going to cover up my loneliness by joining this group. I'm going to stand alone just to see what happens, which takes courage, and it takes, as Juan said earlier, it takes persistence. Defy the sense of guilt that will try to take you over when you leave a false doctrine. And I will tell you how you can tell whether you've been in a false doctrine or not, whether you're miserable or not, and whether you're still lonely or not. You see, it is indeed the truth that makes you free of all this. Then, as Sally said, then you may meet other people who have gone the same route, who have gone through this terrible conflict, this terrible crisis, and didn't know what to do, and thought that life wasn't worth living, and in fact it is not worth living as long as we're living miserable. I don't mean we should end life. I mean we should start to find life for the first time. Then you will meet other people who have gone through the same thing you have gone through, and have gone to the point where they now know the truth, but are still working hard because there's something new to learn every day. This is why we're talking right now, because we want to learn more. We want to experience more. And we're all watching ourselves right now as we're sitting here. Well, again, throw your mind back and on your own mind as you're listening to this. You're responding to this. I know you are. You're responding emotionally, and you are nodding your head too, are you not? Because you recognize what I said as being true in your life. Now go on from there. Have a intense self-honesty to say, I am going to defy all this false guilt. Don't you dare let any human being or your own wrong thoughts keep you in prison. You don't have to stay there. You can get out, but you have to work hard. Work hard in the right way. You understand that while there is persistence, there can be wrong persistence. You can wrongly persist in a war for 50 years. That's persistence, but it's destructive. And it's destructive to have beliefs, to persist in beliefs. We're going to persist in getting rid of beliefs because at last, thank heaven, we see through them. We see what they did to us. We see how they make us angry and afraid. Now I'll add one other point. Then maybe Juan or Sally will take it back up again. This is a familiar one, but come back to this. We're discussing fundamentals today. You will grow to the extent that you're able to take it, that you're able to take shock without running away. How much truth can you take without getting angry or upset? Let me repeat the question again, and you listen to it, and you remember it when you go away from this talk, and when you go away from the home or the hall, wherever you may be listening to this tape. You will grow to the degree of truth that you can take without getting angry or upset. And if you're angry, you're also upset. And if you're upset, you're also angry, whether you see it or not. And we've discussed why we get angry and upset at the truth. Because we're afraid it's going to destroy something of value. It is trying to destroy our prison cell. So, I'll ask you a question, both the couple here and those of you listening to the tape. How much will you have the courage to take without running away? And if you do run away, come back. Come back and take more. Be able to take all these things that you haven't been able to take up till now because you were frightened of them. The truth is the kindest thing on earth. If it shocks you, if there's a fact there that shocks you, it is trying to save you. Stick with it. Let yourself be what you think is what you might call self-destruction, psychological self-destruction. What is being destroyed is all these images, all these guilts, all these fears that has made you miserable. And you know, may I tell you something? I know how unhappy you really are. I know how you hide things. I know how many stage performances you put on to make other people think that you're happy and to make yourself think you're happy. I know beyond that. I know how you really are. Now, I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone or to sound clever. It's simply a fact. I know this. I know how miserable you are. I don't care how famous you are, how active you are, how wealthy you are. I don't care how involved you are in social causes. how secure you are in your family. I know that you are a miserable human being. And this is not said in criticism. This is said because this is the start. Remember we said this is the start to see our state. Now we can start to get out of it. Don't lie. Don't tell lies. This is the way out. And when you get out, you'll look back and you might even smile at yourself, but you'll be so glad that you did come back, that you stuck with it, that you said, sorry, this is as far as I'm going in this misery and in this self-deception. I'm going to stick and face the pain and the upset until I learn what it's all about. And you will learn what it's all about. And then there won't be any more pain or any more upset ever in anything, because you'll be a self-unified human being, and you'll be a decent and an honest and a courageous human being, and you will have a conscience. Comments?
Just a little comment before the tape is over. We only got about a couple of minutes.
Yes.
That's right. You got to see it. Got to see this guilt. When you 3 years ago, I couldn't have taken this.
Yes.
I couldn't have taken it. So I was very afraid of what others would think of me. You know, when I left the religion, I felt guilty about it, of what others would think, and also my own thoughts were attacking me, making me feel guilty. Well, you know, you're going to hell now because you left the Catholic religion. But it can be done, so I know what you're talking about.
You have experienced this for yourself.